Yay. Hey guys, I'm so excited. These smalls are one of my favorite things to create. I just love being able to do them quick. They feel like practices, they feel like warm-ups, and then they look like playing cards when you're done. So I'm just taking these are those 4x6 index cards. They're just those super thick index cards. They do come in like 5x7 and stuff. So if you want to work bigger, that's these are a great solution. Do they warp? They do bend a little bit, but not like other papers that I've worked with. So you get what you pay for. I want to say they're like maybe like 10, maybe $15 for like a pack of 100 of them. And I haven't even come close to using all 100 yet. And I do them almost all the time as a warm up before I start a series. So just a really cool idea. You might also have like scrap papers around, or you might want to do this in a journal. So don't feel like you have to do these. I just kind of like when I peel the tape back and have these like playing cards of original artwork to look at. So I'm going to go through now once I've got these taped down to this is just a drawing board to keep them from moving around. And I'm going to gesso them so that they're not porous so the paint rolls across the top. Really a good thing to do, especially with an expensive paper. It's going to really inhibit you from spreading the paint. So just go ahead and gesso, whether you want to do white or a color or clear or anything you want. Just get that porousness out. All right, I've waited for those to dry, and I'm just taking, this is that graphite pencil, that Lyra one with that cool holder, and I'm just doing these continuous line drawings to get a pretty general idea of composition, give me something to work in. It's almost like creating your own personal coloring book on here. You can also use your non-dominant hand, which is a fun way to do this as well. I don't put too much thought into these. These are just kind of getting some compositions down so I'm not overthinking my practice. So continuous line drawing, getting some different, I try to get a couple different vase styles, a couple different florals. I like to put that little dead guy at the bottom, but just basically really loose just to get the juices flowing, give me something to work on as I'm starting to put paint down. Now, one thing I want to note, I'm going to keep everything that I'm working on in this one as opposed to the first color pop clear. So you're going to see the stems on the inside. I'm going to make it really abstract. I've decided to keep everything really simplified and abstract in this one as opposed to the other one, just so that we can really get a fun use of color without having to overthink. I feel like a lot of times when we start painting florals, people will get tighter and tighter if we start to get a little bit more distinctive in the design. So we're going to keep these almost like illustrations throughout, keeping it nice and loose. Assuredly, you can go ahead and play around with your floral types if you don't want to keep it loose. But I, for this one, just wanted to keep it really kind of like an illustrative, loose, abstract composition throughout the series. And you see me going in there. I'm using that dark orange that we made with that quinacridone magenta, with that quinacridone nickel azo gold and the cad yellow. And if you forget what you used when you made these, that's why I make the reference. If I can get it out of my mouth, I would say it correctly. And then I've just used some values of that yellow. I put the green on there, a couple values, and now I'm going into what I was calling a neutral, but really looks purple, but I love it. I love the contrast of this kind of bright pop of color and these dull, subtle neutrals in here. Now you'll notice as I'm going around, I'm not keeping, right now I am, but I won't keep that vase a solid entity. I'm going to fill it in, and I'm going to use the background, the little bits of white, as the delineation between glass vase starts here and background starts there. You're going to see. So again, I'm using this very expressive, abstract way of painting. So you don't have to focus on getting a vase right or worried about dimension and stuff like that. Let's keep the dimension to the paint. Let's keep the depth to the color and not necessarily the style. So I'm going to keep it, I just really like that. And that illustrative look appeals to a lot more whimsical side as well. So I feel like that's a good balance of both. You can see I used that darker teal on the bottom as the shadow, made it lighter. So I'm using value scale again. I'll put a darker layer first, and then I'll put a lighter layer on top of it. I like a little bit of the layer that came before it to peek through. And again, these are practices. So if you, let's say you make one and you're like, God, I hate that color combo, that's okay. Make another, make another. That's why there's 6. You should not spend too much time on these. These should just be something that you don't overthink and you just kind of move on to the next one when you feel like, okay, I've worked that to whatever I'm going to and move on. Now, this whole series of 6 here took, I would say, about 45 minutes. I've made it just a little bit faster because I don't think you're going to miss anything in my development of these smalls. I really am showing these as support for you because I hope that at some point you watch this, you turn the camera off, and then you just go to your small pieces and you just paint without trying to really mimic. I want to guide you in this, but I want you to also have that freedom to create so that it's your own practice and your own warm up as you're developing through these 6 small works. You see, I kind of went back. I added a little touch of the green as a highlight, a lighter value of that green. You can even see I took some of that darker neutral color, that purplish color on the bottom, and just kind of touched it around the vase instead of drawing the vase in. This is just for fun. I call them pops of color, even though it's not a bold pop of color in there. It's like this pixelated dash work around the vase. It doesn't necessarily outline the vase, but it does give you a little semblance of, oh, there's something there that's not just, I didn't paint the background kind of thing. I left this area blank. I'm going into that second one. I've got a red flower, added a little bit of highlight. Going into the green, again, I work the value scale. I start dark, then I go light. I'm kind of putting in the vase in this one a sketch layer of turquoise in there. And then I'm going to do the top of the background, but notice how I did that kind of dark. I'll still leave space. I really think that sometimes the vases can get you caught up in, am I making it dimensional? Do I doing stripes and all that kind of stuff? And we did a little bit of that before. So I wanted to change this up to meet all styles. Whether you want to paint, if you don't want to paint florals, then this is a really good way to just kind of not get you focused on florals. If you do want to paint florals, now I've offered you 2 different ways to kind of interpret them. This is a much looser, freer way to do them. Started with the background color a little bit darker turquoise, adding a little bit light. I love the bounce of the dark color underneath with a little bit of light color. It's very pixelated. It's very loose. I want you to stay loose. Again, with the bottom, I'm putting in this darker yellow. I've got a shadow down there, and then I will paint around that dark yellow, leaving that shadow in there, and you'll see me just kind of do that. I can work a little bit lighter each time. So again, I want you to have this ultimate freedom of play. No one's going to judge these. No one's going to look at them. These almost like our map or our grid that we made to say these are the colors that we can make. This is now kind of our reference as, well, when I put those colors together, what do they look like? And that's why you'll see me kind of changing up the background, the table, the flower, and kind of get several different ideas of how when placed together they resonate with each other. And that's the sole purpose of working in these smalls. I also mentioned, because I tell this to people all the time, and this is not an original idea. I got it from Bob Burridge, if you are familiar with his work. He goes into his studio and he does small works, and then he sells these original small works on paper at a lesser price than he would on a canvas or a large canvas that he normally would do. And he's a very high-end artist, and I think this is a great way. And I know some of you might go to festivals or sell your work or do greeting cards or anything like that. It's just a great way to use these small works instead of creating digital prints of an original work. Just create your own. I call them original prints, but they're not prints at all, but they're packaged as if they were, digitized and mass produced, but they're simple, original pieces of artwork. And those pieces that I create here will be a part of, I have on my Patreon, I have a tier that is art in the mail. And every month, those students that are in the collectors tier on Patreon get one of these original or something like this. They'll get one of these because I have these done, but an original piece of small artwork in the mail. And this is what I use. So it's a really good way. Why not turn your practice into something that propels you forward? So just another idea to play around with. I really love this color. That was that darker red that we made. This was the magenta and the quinacridone crimson. I really like that. It's almost like a deep persimmon or pomegranate. I love it. Makes me want a pomegranate Cosmo. And again, just changing the way the colors are matched. I've got predominant areas, less dominant areas, focal point areas. And what I mean by that is, the background takes up most of the space. That's a predominant area. The table actually is more predominant than the flowers. And then you've got these pops, these focal point pops and these florals that kind of hope to catch the eye. So when you're working with color, it's not enough to just make pretty colors. How do they work together? And this is your chance to play. Love this pink on this dark red here. And that's the same color. It's just the tints of those colors going down. And then you'll see the vases are not drawn in like I call it the obligatory Sharpie marker line where you just outline. I'm leaving space. I'm letting that white of the background kind of come through. If I had painted my background red, I would have let the red of the background come through. So it's almost the act of negative painting and allowing the shape of the vase to stay there and painting around it. I really like doing that. There's a lot of cool things that can happen when you do things like this. Don't limit it to vases, but just the idea of that. Many people will say, "Oh, how do you paint how do you paint glass?" Well, this is like the first step into painting glass. You can refine it as much as you want because that is a stylistic thing as well. If you're not going out there to be a realistic painter, well, then you can render glass or transparency in any number of ways. That's the beauty of being an expressive painter. And this is just, I would call it the first step in painting glass. So if anybody says, "Can you paint glass?" You can. That's exactly how you do it. And like I said, you can stylize it, you can add water, you can do a number of things if you want to really hone in and stylize this some more and develop it some more. But in its basic core being, that's how we're actually rendering glass by not painting it, if that makes sense. I do love this one too. This one I'm working on now. That is the lighter of the reds going down first, and then or second lightest of the reds, and then this is the most lightest going on top of that. I've been doing a lot of pops of color and making the whole thing poppy, but now I've got this soft pastel in comparison to what I'll do in the background, which is that darker neutral, and I really like that play too. So it's almost like I think I go to things out of habit, like muscle memory. So I almost have to remind myself, oh, maybe I should try this. This is not my go-to. And inevitably, every time I try something that is not my traditional go-to, I love it. And I do really love this one a lot. Also note, I will shape those big flowers with the outside. I refer to this as painting the floral as working from the inside out and then editing it down from the outside in. So I work from the inside out and then the outside in. I love when the background and the subject have relevancy to each other. I don't paint the background and then paint the flowers on top. I find the energy is painted into my work when each section, and even if you look at the line drawings here, each section is like a puzzle piece. And when you can distinctly almost pull one from the other and they can make a puzzle without it having to be like what came first, when they're all kind of on the same layer together, I think that's when the energy really happens. It's like inviting people to a party and having them all involved instead of inviting someone in the party and keeping them locked in the bedroom and not talking to them throughout the night. And that's what happens. That was a horrible analogy, but that's what happens when you paint the background and you never revisit it again and you just keep building layers on top of it. It is your duty as an artist to kind of keep those layers engaged throughout the painting process. Again, you can see the transparent face as I'm working through this. And I'm working in that next, I put that darkest muted tone down and then I put the next tint down, and then I'll just keep working a little bit lighter. But I really do love the way they play off of each other. And you'll notice I leave just a little bit of the layer before. I don't really want to go in here and cover everything up. I think that's the beauty of being able to show the depth in the value of layers. So I have every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I just painted everything out. And usually it's when I start overthinking. So if you find yourself doing that, just kind of reel yourself back in and see if you can't keep just a little bit of the layer that came before it. And you can see a lot of the layer that came before it, kind of where that horizon is, where the table ends and the background starts. Painting a little bit of the shadow back into those flowers, and then I'll paint in a little bit more light. Kind of that dance going back and forth. I try not to paint flower petals. I prefer to paint or render shadow and light on an object, the space that light takes up instead of the petals and the detail, which is why using a bigger brush. This is a size 6 brush, which is pretty big. These are 4x6, give or take a little bit of the edge. So the bigger the brush, the more loose you'll be able to paint, the less control you'll have, and sometimes that's good for people that tend to get really tight as they work. This is that quinacridone magenta with that quinacridone nickel azo gold. And then I mixed that dark layer of red with the quinacridone nickel azo gold cadmium yellow mix. And so I've kind of taken two colors and I'm playing with them together. Still a little bit monochromatic, but there's a tonal shift. The red is much redder and the orange is much orangier. And then this is not the darkest of that red because it would clash with the red flower. So I just went to the next value down. Again, shaping those flowers with the background. I love looking at them together. It's like a snapshot of possibility. Maybe I just like the idea of that as well. And you can work out any of the kinks. You know, that one directly above the one I'm working on is not my favorite. Um, but I don't dislike it because I learned a lot about it as well. I think I don't appreciate the blue and red combo as much as I really like that lavender yellow combo, or this one I'm working on right now. I really like that pink with the red and the orange. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, this vase, it gives me a run for my money. I overthink this vase. I'm like, oh, let me lighten it up. Let me do this. Let me do that. Oh, hot mess. Hot mess. And then one of my real big issues that I realized is I painted it as a solid instead of making it transparent. And I was like, what the heck am I doing? I kind of lost my head there. So then I kind of worked to try to bring it back to its former self. I probably should have just left it and walked away and called it a day, but I was a stickler and overthinking it. Could have just walked away and been like, hey, sorry, I painted that as a solid. Or it could have just been blue glass. Hot mess I am. But I do like this color combo a lot. But I make a hot mess of that vase as I work. And I leave it thinking, oh, it's fine. I'll just leave it. And then I come back to it because I'm obsessing over it. And I have a couple different thought processes I'm doing it too. And none of them are really, really good either. But as promised, the good, bad, and the ugly go in there. But it's funny because I actually use this one to do with one of the next medium paintings because I loved it so much. Even though that vase gave me trouble, I really did love the color palette. There's something, I guess, if you were a teen during the 80s, it's that preppy pink and green. Feels reminiscent. You see me overworking it? Why would I paint it light purple? What the hell am I thinking? Now I painted back that original color. I know, I know. I was trying to do something fun and I was just like, ah, stop. Walk away. And for those of you wondering, this is what obsessing it looks like. Oh yeah, I'm still here, obsessing over it. Now I'm editing it down because that makes a difference, right? Like if you edit it down, oh, it's going to look better if you do that. What a hot mess I am. I want to yell to myself as I'm painting this, for the love of God, woman, move on. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should do what I was supposed to do and make it transparent. Could have walked away at this point, too. So I don't know about you, but I think it's fair to say in the next few minutes, you're going to be bored of watching me play on this flower vase because there's at least 10 times that it would have been okay enough to walk away. And let me also reiterate that it's probably really good that this is only 4 by 6 that I'm working on, because had this been like a 16 by 20 painting, could you imagine how obsessed I could have gotten? So, some of the things that I'm sharing with you, in order not to obsess over it like I am, do as I say, not as I do, right? Are because I too can find myself like, why isn't that right? Why isn't it looking right? What can I do to make it better? If you can work some of these kinks out in the smaller ones, it does help you process the potential foibles you might have in the bigger ones. So I haven't done any turquoise flowers at this point, so I know, let's go ahead and see how that looks. And I'm putting in the darkest and then just working in some of the values as I go down. Changed my brush. I made it kind of a little round brush. I was trying to do some smaller shaped flowers. I've been thrown all off my course with the one that came before it. This is the darkest green. I'll layer a couple lighter greens in there. Back to my big brush. Question's always, what color do you make the background? I really did like this, not gonna lie. I kept going back to this gray purple color. And I know, so odd, I don't love purple, but look at me using it more and more. But again, that neutral color feels like it offsets the pops of color. I'm just going to work my way around. There's a lot of small little flowers now, so I'm going to have to keep turning my brush and painting in between them. Clearly, the two big flowers is a lot easier to paint around than smaller ones. For those of you that want to get tight and use tiny little brushes, this is going to be your challenge, not to pick up the tiny little brush if you decide to do little flowers. Again, leaving the outside or outline of the vase. Oh, and just so you know, even though I'm working on this last one here, I go back to that other painting. Yeah. Obsessed much? Yeah, I do love this background. And I think that muted background makes that turquoise pop out of there. It even makes the green pop out of there. Sometimes when we think of color pops, we think of like bright reds and those kind of things. Just by putting some pastels around your piece, doesn't have to be a flower, it can be an abstract, it can be anything. It really does help just all the other colors come alive. And in practice, that should be in everything you do. Finding some kind of neutralized color that will make all the other colors sing. There's that beautiful persimmon pomegranate color. And then I leave the shadow by painting around, just making it a little bit lighter. And this is just those little touches. Like I said, I don't actually Sharpie marker line around the vase. And like I said, I use that term because every time I see somebody like outline something, I refer to it as the Sharpie marker line. I'm even going one step more muted. I feel like it makes the turquoise and the green more relevant. Interesting too to take note how all 6 of these taped to the board kind of play off each other as well as individual artworks, as if they were sitting next to each other in a gallery. So if you are someone that does sell your artwork, or if you're working in an art series of several artworks, this is a great way to see, well, how will they look in this palette all lined up? I can imagine 20 of these, and then you'd really know what you were doing. So these could be like the little studies before the big studies. Just so you know, just in case you missed it, I'm back on that piece. Yep. Still there obsessing. How many coats of paint later? Too many. That's the answer. Just too many. But I figure I'd show you how I finished it up, because if I showed you these later and you're like, that's not what you left that flower like, I remember that. You spent about 12 minutes on that flower. Now at least you know why. And so this only has a couple more seconds left before I give it up. But just wanted to show you how I did go back to it and I wouldn't let it defeat me. The best part of having these little paintings down on here is truly peeling the tape back. So now I'll show you that because it's my favorite part. People always ask me, what do you write your name on your piece with? It really does depend on what I'm working with, acrylic or oil. This is just a micron pen, just writing it on the top there and then peeling the tape back. Yay! Just a little word of advice. If you find that you're not using artist tape, maybe you're using painter's tape, I would take the tape and kind of press it to your jeans before you put it down, so some of that sticky will come off. It'll still be perfectly good and sticky, just it won't be super sticky if it starts peeling back or tearing your paper. If you notice, I kind of pull away from the thing. I don't just pull straight back, so I kind of encourage it not to take the paint off by pulling opposite of the artwork itself. But aren't those cute? They're like your own little playing cards. I could totally see these as like your own little deck of inspiration over time. And they just make me happy. And then I'll use these to decide what I want to paint for the rest of the series.